Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this week's MDICx webinar. We're delighted to be able to present our quarterly update on the CDRH Case for Quality Voluntary Medical Device Manufacturing and Product Quality Pilot Program. We have a great panel of speakers here today to share about the pilot program. George, Zach, and Kim Kaplan will share an update from CMMI on the current statistics of the pilot program. We have two great industry participants who are going to be giving us their perspective, Catherine Merrill from Medtronic and Elizabeth Sadinsky from Baxter. And finally, Cisco Pazenti from CDRH will give an update on learnings from CDRH in this pilot program. Encourage you to submit any questions that you may have into the chat box, and we're reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes of our hour together today to answer your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to George and Kim.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, so as you heard, this pilot program, the Voluntary Medical Device Manufacturing and Product Quality Pilot, is also known internally at the Institute as the Medical Device Discovery Appraisal Program. You can go ahead to the next slide. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what this pilot is, it is part of FDA's larger Case for Quality initiative to help elevate the industry from just compliance to one of continuous improvement and product quality, all with the ultimate goal to increase patient safety. This pilot was officially announced last year, December 28th, and officially launched January 2nd of this year. Next slide. So we, during the course of 2017, when this pilot was being developed, we identified several ways to measure the success of an initial pilot, ranging from the value to participants, making sure that they are receiving some sort of value out of this. We're calling this our program effectiveness measures. If you look to the right, you're able to see what we're doing to identify those measures. They're coming in from post-appraisal survey results, participant feedback, appraiser feedback, FDA feedback, and lessons learned that are being incorporated into the program. Additionally, we're tracking on program adoption metrics. This is related to the consistency and scalability of the program. Is it sustainable? And to measure that, we're looking at how many appraisals are coming in, what is the wait time for these appraisals, how many people do we have trained and ready to deliver these appraisals, and incorporating those lessons learned as well. And then sort of looking to the future, we have sort of some longer term next steps in terms of how we're trending this participant data and quality performance metrics over time. George, did you have anything you wanted to add to this slide?
No, we'll talk a little bit more about the next steps as we get through this part of the deck.
Great. Okay, next slide. All right, so regarding program adoption metrics to date, we have 16 organizations enrolled with 24 facilities. And actually, as of today, that is now 25 facilities. This one just came through. We have completed 12 appraisals, and we have 3 more scheduled in the next month. The current time from scheduling an appraisal to when it's actually executed is anywhere from 12 to 54 days, with the mean time being 33. Next slide. And regarding our program effectiveness metrics to date, these are 4 of the top questions in the post-appraisal survey that we send out to participants to gauge the effectiveness. So far, we've had 66 respondents, and of those, about 89% agreed that the appraisal identified areas or processes that could improve how work is performed to increase product quality. 97% recognized that these practice areas did not conflict at all with any regulatory compliance areas. 100% found the appraisal to be of value and would still recommend this program. And we're sort of going through these a little bit quickly so that way we can get to sort of the meat of today's webinar. Next slide. George, did you want to speak to the next step?
I'll take this up. So as you saw there, Kim presented that we now have 25 facilities enrolled across 16 organizations. Our target for this calendar year was 30 appraisals. So here on June 5th, we're in pretty good, we're tracking to that, maybe slightly ahead of schedule for that 30. Our primary goal here for the rest of the year is to continue to execute this pilot program, to be successful in executing to that 30. So still looking for a few more facilities to enroll. We're not completely capped at 30, but it does seem that with what we have from a scale perspective, we're going to keep it in about in that ballpark. But it's not as if we get to 30, we're going to suddenly shut the program off. So we'll continue to execute as many appraisals as we can in this particular calendar year. Additionally, we are, at this point, since we have a dozen appraisals in the rearview mirror, we're very much in active conversations with our participants as to what our second appraisals or third appraisals, fourth appraisals, what those are going to, what they're going to look like. That's a conversation that's with the participating organization as well as the agency and our lead appraiser community. And that is, there's a multitude of facets to that, including which particular practice areas would be in scope, which particular levels of capability, the size of the appraisal, the frequency of the appraisal, what would be in the best value add for the organization as well as the agency to continue to meet the particular goals of the program. That's an active conversation. We expect to, there's some draft ideas on the board with those stakeholders at this point. Really for this meeting, we're not in a position to share exactly what the second appraisal would look like from a nuts and bolts perspective, but we should be able to do that by our next quarterly webinar. Additionally, related to this, there's the multi-site appraisal approach that's also an active conversation that we're having. So as we're aware, often in the device manufacturing value stream, you have your corporate regulatory location, you have your design location, you have your manufacturing location. So a product does not necessarily live soup to nuts under one roof. And so as we've been approaching our appraisals through a facility lens or a location lens, we're having active conversations again with those same stakeholders as to what a multi-site appraisal would potentially look like so that the benefits that the agency is offering can be considered across multiple facilities, but also doing that in a way that is considered of an appropriate appraisal approach as well. So we're working through that. This fourth bullet here, determine the use of a performance report in the appraisal process. So an active conversation we've also been having with the agency and our participants is outside of the appraisal process, which particular quality measures, and this is really tying this to the other effort that MDIC is involved in the case for quality, the analytics effort, are there particular measures of safety, effectiveness, reliability, availability for each of the particular facilities that we've been involved in from an appraisal perspective, that we can work with that organization to collect those measures, share them with the agency, and then see is there any sort of performance correlation between appraisal activity and improvement in those measurement domains. So all of that really is, while our primary goals here are execute the program, you can see that's really our focus for 2018. You can also see is we are having active conversations and learning as to what the program should be in 2019 with second appraisals, multi-sites appraisals, tying it to the performance metrics. And we really expect, as a part of this pilot, we would be defining a white paper or a study paper of some sort, which would be our lessons learned from this calendar year, as well as any proposed actions that we have from 2019. That would be with input from our participating organizations, our lead appraiser community, as well as the agency. Kim and I will likely start to have that in draft, that we'll be walking that around here in the fall, but it would be for a broader review by the end of the calendar year. Kim, anything to add?
No, that's great. Thanks. Next slide. And then finally, we're including some additional resources for those of you who are less familiar with this pilot and are interested in learning more. Of course, there's MDIC's website, and we have two of the links to presentations on their website here, as well as FDA's public meeting last October, and a couple of recent articles that have been published about participant experiences.
Yeah, I'll add to this that most of you are familiar with MedTech Insight, or what used to be known as the Gray Sheet. They've started to run a series of articles. We're only pointing to the first of these, but I think that it's going to be at least a four-part series. They've released 2 of those. Additionally, they also have a podcast. So if you don't care to read through it, you can also get the snippets by way of the podcast from Sean Schmidt and the staff at MedTech Insight. So good resources here to give you additional information on the background of the program.
All right, and with that, we'll pass it back to you, Stephanie.
Great, thanks, George and Kim. I will turn control over to Catherine Merrill from Medtronic. She is going to be the first of two of our industry presenters here today. So, well, if you give us a moment to transition slide sets here, I'll turn control over to Catherine.
Cool. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see your screen right now.
Cool. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Merrill. I'm a Lean Sigma manager at Medtronic, and I'm responsible for rolling out some of their enterprise level programs, and one of them would be the Case for Quality within Medtronic. So I lead the activities within the organization for the Case for Quality program. And as part of that, I had an opportunity to become trained as an embedded appraisal team member. And so I put together a presentation sort of to give everybody some insights on what I learned as a part of that. So the presentation will be pretty quick, but I'll go over how the Case for Quality has pretty much matured or grown within Medtronic, the CMMI training I've received, the pilot site preparations that we did. We've been through one pilot, and then most of the slides that I have, about 5 slides, are around the appraisal experience and some observations that I had. And then the most exciting slide to me was basically our pilot site response that they had after we went through the pilot. So, and then I should have time for a few questions at the end. At Medtronic, this is really high level, but we have been engaged from the beginning. I know that we've had the benefit of having top-level leadership engagement for about 7 years, pretty much from the highest levels of the organization. They've been very interested at just the shared vision of the FDA and industry around getting improved product quality, and the fact that we're all targeted on the same thing has really been something that Medtronic has been excited about. And we, as you guys know, the MDDA model was approved in 2017, and we enrolled 2 of our sites to be pilot sites in actually that was last year, so 2017. And then this year is when we started the pilot. So we completed our first pilot in April, and this is in Galway, Ireland. And so that's the experience that I'm going to talk through. And we actually have our second one next week in Villalba, so I'll be participating in that one as well. And I'm looking forward to what I'll learn as a part of that as well. So for those of you who may be new to the program, this is just the annual, for us, what the program looks like for us at Medtronic is we'll complete the annual MDDA appraisals. Like George was talking about earlier, they have that what is the second appraisal going to look like, and then we submit quality metrics to the FDA, and that's more connected to what he was talking about, connecting it to the performance metrics as a result of the improvements that we see due to the appraisals. And then we're definitely looking forward to receiving those regulatory benefits. So that's just the high level at Medtronic, how it looks to us for the Case for Quality. And this is where I'm going to jump into just sort of my experience as an embedded appraisal team member for the CMMI appraisal, pilot appraisal that we did. The first thing I'm going to walk through is the CMMI training I received. So have attended a bunch of the Case for Quality and MDIC forums, and those were very helpful to give a high-level overview of the program. But there's still a lot of questions when you do that, because we talk about the model, but it's in generalities, and it's so different. I know within the medical device industry, it's so different from what we're used to that it's hard really to make the connection of what they're saying to what it will really look like. I know we've done industry presentations. I've attended those on the pilot experiences. Those were very helpful as well, because the terminology was closer to what we were used to on how it connects. But the biggest thing that helped me sort of get a handle on what is this appraisal process and how does it differ from an audit for us was I attended the CMMI embedded team member training. And this really had the biggest impact on my understanding of the model, the purpose of it, how it's leveraged, the benefits of it. And then you'll notice I say I passed the test. Now, I have literally worked at Medtronic for 20 years, so I've been out of school forever. And they told me I had to pass the test. So it was one of those things where I studied, and I'm like, man, I remember this. I remember this testing thing. So, but I passed. I'm very proud of myself. So if any of you want to do it, it's pretty cool. But, oh, I went backwards. So that's the CMMI training I received. We leveraged that quite significantly. Me and another lady from an principal engineer from Galway actually attended, and she went back and got to help sort of preparing the site. And I don't want to confuse anyone. Preparation is not really needed to have the appraisal. No solid activities other than, and we'll go through this sort of to set up conference rooms and who's going to be the interviews and the pre-work, but the preparation is really around the mindset people have towards the appraisal, and we leveraged our training to help them with that. So we met with the site leadership and the interviewees that had been selected to better understand the MDICx model purpose, its appraisal versus an audit, how the methodology is different. So it's conversational, it's an interview, there's no artifacts or records. They don't say, well, show me how you do that, give me the paperwork to prove that. That doesn't occur during an appraisal. And then we emphasize the need that they be very transparent about how they do the work. And so the goal is to get with the people who are actually doing the work in the process and can answer questions about how they do the work. And the main goal for that is, can we get the full benefit of the appraisal? I will emphasize as we move forward, it helped, but for the first pilot site, and I would assume it's probably similar around industry if you're a pilot, a site that's interested in enrolling a pilot site, that just expect, because of all our experience in the past, that they are still going to view it potentially as an audit. So they're going to be a little nervous about the appraisal process. And I was really hopeful after the training that we could somehow be the first pilot site that didn't have this issue, but you know, it's just what's required. They told me it would be needed to go through the first pilot, but I evidently have to see it to believe it, and it's true. You have to go through the first one. So that was cool. The next 5 slides, I hope to go through quick because I know I don't have much time, but these are just some of the highlights, not all that I learned by being a part of the appraisal process, but these are some of the biggest ones that sort of stood out to me after the first time of going through the appraisal process. And I know you guys, if you've seen any industry presentations, you've seen this comparison between an audit and an appraisal process, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. I'll just highlight some of the ones that really stood out. The difference in the prep time is significant. And that's because for a CMMI appraisal, really you just need 2 conference rooms with projectors, and you need to sort of work through the prep work to identify what kind of products and processes they want to look at to get a good representation of the site. And then very few interviewers, but it's not the same as for an FDA inspection. For an FDA inspection, business is pretty much interrupted at a site just because of the size of what's required. But it is business as usual as a site is what we were told would happen, and it really did happen for a CMMI appraisal. The resource needs were much less for a CMMI appraisal, we had 3,000 people at our Galway site and only 30 people were touched, and pretty much it was less than 2 hours apiece. If you don't include the coordinator is more involved with that. If you only have 8, they stay within the 8-hour workday. Now, the appraisers work longer than that, but the people at the site don't have to engage more than the 8-hour workday. For an FDA inspection, you pretty much, the inspectors question the employees, and then they'll review records for evidence of gaps against a regulation. For the appraisers, they'll discuss how work is done, and they're looking for gaps against an industry best practice. So this is one of the things that really stood out. It is most likely going to be above and beyond the regulation. So you're looking for something that is going to help the site continuously improve. You're not looking for where they're not meeting regulation. The focus is different. During an interview of the FDA, you're going to just respond to the questions prompted by the FDA. You're not going to provide any additional information. You're just going to answer the question. During an appraisal, it's really descriptive, transparent about how your work is done. But the key insights I got were around the bottom 2 that I have here. For an FDA inspection, they're really focused on compliance only. For a CMMI appraisal, they are looking above and beyond compliance. So you can expect gaps that someone could come back and say, but the regulation doesn't require we do that. And you'd say, yeah, but it is a best practice. It's going to help you meet your performance objectives at your organization for better product quality. So we're looking at that. So the gaps for an FDA inspection, usually you get 43, so the negative impact on the business. During an appraisal, this is the biggest one that sites learn, is they identify continuous improvement opportunities, and you have a positive impact on the business. So that was something that was really nice for the site at the end to see. The next slide is pretty quick, but this was around just the different levels that we have, practice levels that we could be appraised at. There's 5 different levels, and the MDDA scope is for 11 practice areas, and we only go up to practices during our pilot up to level 2. And so the key insight I had was, is there still, even if we perform and they don't identify a lot of continuous improvement opportunities, maybe to a practice level of 2, we know that there's significantly more knowledge, best practice from industry that's out there that we could have access to above and beyond that. So for someone who's been involved in continuous improvement for her whole career, this was an exciting thing for me. I'm like, we've just got all this learning that's embedded within the CMMI model that we could avail ourselves of. So that was pretty cool. This slide is really probably one of the biggest things that stood out to me during the appraisal, just because I kept getting asked by people who were being appraised, all the leadership, how are we doing? And I really wasn't free to sort of answer that question because I was a part of the appraisal team. So I would just let them know, hey, I think it's good because everything's running smooth. But I really had to contemplate this because I'm like, well, what would a good result look like? Because it's not like an audit. So to me, it depends. And it will depend on whether your site is looking for more than just regulatory benefits. So we get the benefits for enrolling, but you could really treat this with an audit mindset. So the purpose would be, hey, I'm going to meet the intent of my level 2 practices within my process. And if you do that, if you look at the results that are reported to you, you have to ask yourself, if I get this type of a result or this type of a result, which one would have more value to the organization if I'm looking at it with an audit mindset? And when someone would ask me, hey, is this a good result? I would have told them, if we get this all green, that's a good result, because I'm looking at it with an audit mindset. If I got this other side right here, the one with all the reds and yellows, then I would say, hey, my next step is to check the box and close those gaps. That's what I'm looking for. If I got this green, I'd be saying, hey, site, you rock. Let's just maintain what we have. So that would be the way you'd look at it. But if the site was looking at it with an appraisal mindset, and this is really the intent of the CMMI appraisal, is can I identify potential improvement opportunities against best practices that have been proven out in industry that will give my organization actually better performance in the long run, which is what we all want for product quality and business practices. Which one would give me more value to my organization? And I would have to say a good result would be we were appraised at a level that allowed us to identify opportunities to improve. So to me, this is the treasure you would get out of the appraisal. So you pay money for the appraisal, you put the effort into the appraisal. What is going to, if I was site leadership, what would allow me to say, hey, I really know things that I didn't know before, that I didn't see before, that can really help me shift my organization. So I would say this result would have given me more value. So then I'd have improvement that would be guided by my CMMI practices. If I got the all green, I'd say, hey, next time maybe we want to appraise at a higher practice level, if I was leveraging it with an appraisal mindset. So that was something that stood out to me, that I really couldn't answer what is a good result unless I knew what mindset the person was asking me in. So, and that sort of leads to this, is that as an organization, also as an industry, it's going to be important to identify what we want from the MDD appraisal during this transition from an audit to an appraisal mentality, especially during this time where we build trust, because it's such a different landscape or a mindset from the relationship that we've had with the FDA in the past, that's the shift we have to make. So our response, especially as leaders within the organization, to the results will dictate how a site responds to results and participates in all the subsequent appraisals. So will we have an audit mentality, prepare for the test, check the box? Will we use it to compare sites, or are we going to use it to say, how can this make us better in the future? So how will we see the gap? And when I talk about a gap, you'll notice the note on the bottom. We're not necessarily looking at a compliance gap. We're looking at it, how are we going to look at the gap to a best practice? So this is my last appraisal experience and observation slide. I just had some additional ones I'll walk through. I sort of alluded to this earlier. The first pilot site, we'll treat it more like an audit, despite all your best intentions and everything that you have hopes for it and everything you say. It's what they know and they understand and they are really good at. So we could even see it as appraisers, the skill sets that they had leveraged in an audit, they leveraged during the appraisal. And I think this is just because trust is built over time, not overnight. And if I were in their shoes, I probably would have treated it the same way. So just be really patient and recognize that it's built through experience. Trust is built through experience. So the observations I had about the appraisers themselves, because I was able to spend the week, I was lucky. I had 3 lead appraisers. So there was 1 lead appraiser, but 3 of them, of the 4 of us, had the experience of a lead appraiser. They were professional and put the interviewers at ease. They're really good at their stuff. Leading an interview session takes skill. It looks really easy. It really looks easy, but it is something that takes skill to do. Lead appraisers were experts at the model and its translation. I mean, they pretty much spoke this language, so they were so familiar with the model that when they could get the interviews and hear what people were saying, they could immediately sort of translate that into what the model's intent was and see any gaps or any strengths that the site would benefit from them reflecting back to them. They did adhere to a strict methodology throughout the whole entire week. Whether the interview was taking place or not, behind the scenes, they have a strict methodology they follow, which I do believe is what leads to very consistent results. And then the confidentiality was taken very seriously. So those are things that really stood out to me. And the last one, this is my favorite slide. And I know we went quick, but I know I have limited time for this one. But for the pilot site response, this only happened on the last day. So it's a 5-day appraisal. It didn't matter how many times we talked to them, and we tried to ease their fears, and the interviews were much more relaxed than they expected. We get to the end, and I just wish everybody could have seen their faces. It really wasn't what they expected. The results were not what they expected in that it was not like an audit at all. So that was really cool. So if it takes all week, be patient with your site. That's probably how I would respond if I was in their shoes as well. So these are some of the quotes that we had from the site leadership team. The week was just what they said it would be, seeing ways to improve. It was a very engaging process. It was strongly aligned with our quality strategy. And I think that was something that the site really, really resonated with is, I mean, we are so focused on how do we improve our product quality that when we come in, that they could see that it directly linked to helping us improve product quality versus, okay, we're looking at the regulation, we got a gap, can we even see how this is going to help us make better product in the future? This linkage between the appraisal and the goal of the site for quality, improved product quality was just immediately evident to them, and so that really helped the engagement. The disruption to the site was minimal, and this is really, for me, this was really key because this was the last week of the year. So for all of those that have a site, you know that the last week of the year is probably the busiest one before the closeout of the fiscal year, and we had a lot of stuff going on at the site, a lot of visits and things like that. And they said, despite that, the disruption to the site was minimal. So that was definitely a testament to the difference between an appraisal and anything they'd experienced before. This one came from the site quality leader. I have both led and participated in FDA inspections, and this experience in comparison was very positive. I welcome where the FDA is going, and I will do everything I can to endorse this program. So it feels like a parallel universe. I love that one. And then the program was true to its word. So one of the main reasons I wanted to include these quotes is just because we've heard all these things before in the industry presentations, at the CMMI and the MDIC forums and from the FDA, but it really is something that you have to experience, but it really does align with what they're saying up front. So that was just something I wanted to communicate to everybody who was on the call or was wondering, hey, we're hearing this, what is the experience actually like? So with that, I don't know if I have any time for questions and answers.
Well, Catherine, we'll have time for a couple of questions, I think, at the end of everyone's presentation. So appreciate your perspective here, and I will, I'm going to take back the presenter ball here and turn things back over to, or turn things over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, are you still on the line and still with us?
I'm still with you.
All right, terrific.
Okay, so I'm Elizabeth Subchinsky. I am from Baxter Healthcare. We are really excited to be part of this pilot, and we are, we've had 2 sites that have gone through an appraisal, and we are enrolling more sites, so we just find it to be hugely valuable. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about our perspective on why we think this program brings value to our company and to our industry. So if you want to go to the next slide. So we look at this as an opportunity to really change our understanding of quality and compliance. Kind of our old paradigm, our quality has requirements and they increase the cost of our products, and we're trying to move to the new paradigm, quality is free. That's a little bit of a joke. That was a book written 25 years ago. Our industry and my company has fallen pretty far behind kind of where quality is and the way people practice it and what it does for it. And we see CMMI as a way to catch up, essentially, to what other industries are doing, and change from a perspective that the quality organization is the police versus the quality organization helps ensure predictable outcomes, to not look at compliance as a goal in and of itself, but rather a thing that just naturally happens when we operate in a state of control. And one of the big things for us is we tend to think of state of control and as something we do inside the quality system. as opposed to a set of behaviors that applies to all of our work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that bottom one, about how we want to change that perception in our company and how CMMI is going to help us do that. So if you can go to the next slide. So again, I find that our industry really has a somewhat obsolete view of quality, and the way we partner with our regulator has really, it's really interfered with us making higher quality products and really innovating. And some of the things that I think we've all seen is there's been a failure to adopt new approaches to quality because we are so afraid of creating a compliance risk, or to adopt new technology for fear of creating that compliance risk. I actually was in a conversation with somebody today where we were talking about data integrity, and they said, well, the data integrity requirements are becoming so extreme, we're just going to go back to paper. Like, that makes no sense, right? That our perspective is taking us backwards instead of pushing us forward. So to really try to change that perception and really move away from talking about, well, I do these things inside the quality system, so I have to follow a certain set of rules to be compliant, and then I have these other set of things that are outside the quality system, and those I don't hold to the same or possibly any standard depending on what they are. So that's the situation that we are trying to correct. So if you go to the next slide. So what has happened, because our approach to quality has fallen behind other industries, if you look at where our capability is versus other industries, an average medical device company tends to operate in the 4 sigma range. And if you look at how the sigmas compare to DPMs, and you think of things like, this is a very typical AQL, where we would say our final release is a 4 sigma product. Motorola many, many years ago said, we need to stop talking about defect percentages. We need to talk about DPM. Those are the quality levels. And so the reality has become that you are more likely to receive a defective medical product, drug or device, than you are to have your luggage lost. And is that really the industry we want to be, right? So what we see CMMI is a way to really revolutionize our industry and use some of these tools that have been implemented for decades in other industries. So if you go to the next slide. And I obviously stole this slide from Kim. We normally don't present in the same forum, but the idea that you can reduce defects, reduce cost, accelerate time to market, and increase customer satisfaction all at the same time, it tends to be somewhat foreign to people. They think, well, I have to have a trade-off. If I'm going to improve the quality, that's going to increase the cost. Or if I'm going to have a value improvement project to cut costs, then I'm going to have to sacrifice quality. And that's really not where we're at. This really can be a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's that view that we're really trying to use this pilot to communicate throughout our organization and really make that become our culture of quality. So if you go to the next slide. So one of the things that is really key for us at Baxter is currently, so when you look at CMMI, it's this world-class performance improvement model that has been used to achieve high performance for many, many companies in many, many industries for many, many years. You see some different behaviors, and one of the key things for us is that we tend to look at things in 2 groups. So we have our products, and most of our, but not all, most of our product stuff is in what we would call, and I'm making the air quotes, inside the quality system. And so we have rules over here, and then we have everything else. We have project management, we have business initiatives, and we are very focused on keeping those separate, and what that does is it really degrades the maturity of our behaviors in all areas. And so what we're trying to do with the CMMI approach is really align everything to our business needs, right? We want to have a successful business, and we want to successfully serve our patients. And so we want to align our processes, our projects, and our products all to those same goals and have one way that we engage in work and focus on making that way we do that work better and more mature and more productive. So if you go to the next slide. And we think that the principles of CMMI and the maturity levels are really a great way to do that, right? Where we can look at perhaps where we are today, where we have very unpredictable results and we're very reactive, moving into a more proactive state where we can respond to issues before they become large issues or before they're actually even issues, to get to a point where we monitor things quantitatively and then can engage in closed loop feedback of all of our processes, again, not just the concept of inside the quality system, but everything we do, so that we can really become a very flexible organization. And so while the regulatory benefits are fabulous for this program, what was really attractive to Baxter is as we've moved under a new leader in the last few years, the expectations for us to perform within our business have gone way, way up. And we really need a new set of tools in the toolbox to meet those expectations of our leaders. And so this is a way to not just improve our relationship with the agency and get some regulatory benefits, but really fill out that toolbox so that we can be successful as an organization. And then if you go to the next one. So this is an example assessment, right? So we had, during an appraisal, we had experts who brought it, just through the appraisal process, brought a ton of value to our organization, assessing these behaviors. And I just have some examples down there that the most fundamental, 1.1 of the requirements, development and maintenance, is record requirements. And again, not just record requirements for your product or your validated process, but record requirements for everything you do. And I had an experience where some engineers were putting together a cost-saving project. And I said, well, did you write down the requirements? And they said, no, this is not a quality system thing. This is just a business thing. I said, well, don't you want to know when you're done? I mean, these behaviors are things that are hugely beneficial to our business, but the way that we view our quality system and our compliance rules tends to make us lose that. And so that applying these types of practices to all of our work will make us a better business and allow us to deliver higher quality products to our patients at the same time. And so that's really where our perspective is. You can go to the next slide. And so we really see this model as a roadmap for us, as a journey that we have been on in particular the last few years, to really become a higher performing company that really meets best-in-class standards, and that this maturity model and the behaviors that it drives are exactly those things that we need to get down that road. It's been proven effective in organizations and governments globally over the last 25 years, right? This is not, we're not making this up as we go along. There's proven evidence of the effectiveness of this type of program. It's demonstrated results in many industries. It provides a clear structure for improvement, and it allows for objective measurement of progress. So we can go on a site-by-site basis, and whether that site, and Catherine talked about this a lot, and I think she did a really nice job with it, it's not about getting all greens. It's about finding out where you have weaknesses and improving on those weaknesses. It's about giving you that focused roadmap at a site-specific level. And so that's been a very large value, and I think the feedback from everyone who's participated in the program is that that's where a lot of the value comes. And then that we're doing this to manage all of our business processes, not just what we consider, making the air quotes again, inside the quality system, but that we really change our daily behaviors, and that will, by default, without any additional effort, lead to a good compliance outcome because it's going to drive that discipline and rigor in everything we do, and it just becomes a resilience and a habit. So if you go to the next slide. So we've been doing things a certain way for a pretty long time, and Jeff Shurin from CDRH gives a really nice talk on, and I think there's a video clip on the MDIC website, but what we have done to date has not given us the results that we want, and so we really need to have some fundamentally different thinking in order to get that different result. If we, if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got. And so Baxter sees this program as really an opportunity to kind of jumpstart that change in thinking. And that's where we are with our program.
Terrific, thank you. I want to turn things over now to Cisco Vicente from CDRH to give a brief update on CDRH's learning so far from the pilot program. And I'll also remind all of you to submit your questions to the chat box because we do want to have a few minutes for questions at the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie, and that sounds great, and I really appreciate all the feedback and input that everybody's provided up until this point in time, Elizabeth and Catherine. Let me see here. Are you going to move the...
I'll run this one.
Sounds good. So go to the next slide. So, just what things we're going to cover right now, and I'm going to run through some of this stuff fairly quickly. I just wanted to make sure there's a lot material just there for reference, since these slides are going to be made available for anybody moving down the road, and I'll focus in on a couple of the key areas as we're moving forward. So next slide. This is not new information. I think you saw some of this already from Kim earlier, where we are, what are we seeing so far. We've got 27 really applicants that we've received that met the qualifications for enrollment. 25 of them are active. 2 withdrew because of, just they had other priorities for their, resources at that point in time. And so while this was originally an intent that they had, they needed to reprioritize where they were putting those resources for the upcoming year, and that was perfectly fair and okay for them to do that. It wasn't an impactful activity for their standing on our end. Here's a little bit of a breakout of what we've got. One of the things to note, with the onset of this pilot, it was always theorized, can we do something where, the scope of the appraisal can be done at a much higher level, and we do have one of those type of activities going on right now with one of the participants just to see, what is the scalability of the appraisal process, and I think that's actually a great opportunity. We didn't start off that way. Our systems are internally from an FDA standpoint, they're very structured to the site-specific format. So this is one that we had to kind of think through and figure out how we were going to do. We have a really wide and varied portfolio of firms with different product classes, each one, finding their own distinct value from participating in the opportunities. We have committed to some modification updates on our side and what we're trying to do and learn through in that process, and we're trying to really bring up the whole center through the activities, right? So this is not just us uniquely leading these efforts. We're trying to do this in unison with, for example, our review division, so they are coming up to speed with what is expected. They're easing into the modifications and changes ourselves, so it's not a big surprise. We're trying to learn where the real crunch points might be moving forward. The participants who have been involved up until now from the industry side who've started the process have actually been great about really working with the review branches and easing into the streamlined changes and making it so that we can move forward. So far we've received 4 of these streamlined submissions, and they've actually been able to fulfill them within that 48-hour time frame. I think one of the feedbacks we got from the review division is, can we change that to 2 business days, just because it gives them the coverage of what happens if you get it on a Friday night and a weekend, which I think we're all familiar with here. The other pieces we've already started, one of the FreightWays pre-approval inspections, and we've got a internal streamlined site change template that is being reviewed that will hopefully make public for some of the participants right now to start utilizing also. One of the key pieces of this is just the shift from the inspections throughout the course of the year. Now, that being said, we've run into a few encounters where the inspection goes out anyways, and it's too late for us to stop it. Oftentimes, it coincides with one that was scheduled at a foreign facility, and all the approvals that we take really get through that process already, so it's very difficult for us to pull it back. In those cases, the participants who have been impacted, they've actually been phenomenal with regards to still taking it as a learning opportunity and seeing what comes out of it. And I believe that there really hasn't been any issue where there has been a non-compliant situation and the appraisal looking perfect. So it's been really, I think, at least a really great learning experience from an FDA standpoint. I know it's additional effort and work for some of our participants that we were trying to modify, but it is a systemic reality that we're trying to manage with regards to how our planning cycles go and how quickly those systems really can move when something like that comes up. We try to get ahead of it as much as possible. Some of them do slip through the cracks. So next slide. So this has come up a couple of times, and I wanted to just take a moment to highlight this because as we move forward, one of the goals that I think we've got overall for all of this, and you heard it a little while ago with something that Elizabeth presented and maybe Catherine presented, but we keep talking about whether or not we're trying to raise the quality aspects of industry. I think what we're trying to do is learn where the limitations are and what are the right, for lack of a better word, right, where are the right engagement points for the regulatory system to really come into play. It's not necessarily, and I want to make sure that it's clear for people that this does not mean that the medical device industry has a quality problem. It just means that there's a way that we could do this a hell of a lot better for everyone, probably get a win-win situation for the industry, for the agency, for the end users, to driving those patient outcomes as we move forward. But it isn't just something that is going on within the medical device manufacturer, the medical device industry itself. There's also an aspect from an agency standpoint that we've got to learn what's the impact of the current regulatory approach, the current regulatory framework, and how is that driving maybe some of these behaviors. So the application of the CMMI model to this and really looking at what's going on helps us get a lot broader and a much more consistent perspective of what's going on out there in the regulatory system itself, and where do we need to start maybe focusing a little bit of the effort or collaboration on in order to make some changes. So right now, and I think if you hit to forward a little bit again, Stephanie, you'll see that this is where we have our current regulatory focus, right? It's really all around the quality systems, but I think you've seen already from Catherine and that really it's all about everything else also that's part of that. If we focus way too much time and energy on that quality system element, that's where everybody pays their time, their attention to, and all these other portions that really deliver on that overall quality tend to be, it's just the reality, right? The resources aren't there to really pay and drive the attention that they need. So this is an opportunity for us to try to learn also where do we need to make some significant changes as an agency or as a regulator to help move some of this moving forward. Next slide. So quick things that we're learning, and this is just high level, but we've got a good data set right now. But the industry, again, they're doing really well in certain other process areas. Oftentimes they coincide with elements of the regulation. So it's not like there is a disconnect with the approach or anything else. They are just a lot more focused on how is the work actually being done versus just confirming the compliance and establishment of the regulatory system and compliance to your procedures. So one of the things we're learning is that, you know, a lot of the areas and elements in the process areas that might coincide, for example, with that 8/20/30 design control procedures, the industry does really, really well. So with things that we're thinking about, how do we modify the program, you know, to provide value by saying, okay, we've got this. Industry seems to be doing this well. What's the next area that maybe contributes, that takes us to the next level, starts to drive better integration that we can focus time and energy on, and how do we shift the, I think it was talked about beforehand, the second appraisal or moving forward to include some of that. The other pieces that we're looking at are, you know, where are there opportunities where we're seeing just hiccups or lags, right, systemically. And this is not about the manufacturer, because you'll see the pattern repeated in some way or another. That tends to lead us to question what's happening in terms of how we're thinking through things, how we're applying our, maybe our focus as an agency in order to either inhibit or drive the behavior we're looking at. And there is a real opportunity here that I think we can collaboratively tackle and improve the whole way the framework or the regulatory approach and the inspections are performed in order to help drive that increased focus on continuous improvement. And that's something that we're going to probably look at and talk about over the next year or so. If we go on to the next slide. I'm going to quickly run through these next steps. One of the things that we're looking to drive is a focus on those metrics, those measures. What is that leading set of indicators that we all could be looking and visibly paying attention to show that sustainment versus having to be in on site or having these appraisals continuously happening without evolving or moving to the next value-added stages. You know, that's something that is part of the original intent of the project. We started getting some of the metrics in. Now we're going to start engaging around some of those and see what needs to change, because it's great. We're starting to get some openness, which is phenomenal. We're still not getting to the right metrics, or at least not understanding what the value that they're driving for the organization. Next slide. This is just what we're looking to do with that. So again, it's really about understanding how you're measuring, how are we focusing on the same things, how do we know collectively that you can react when things are going on, and if so, we can just back off and let that system work and move forward. Next slide. And then what are we looking at a future state, right? We really are driving to make this something where we get that visibility, that confidence, without having to be in the actual organization or at the site in order to see that the progression is being made. Things happen. We realize that. We want to be able to say, okay, we recognize, everybody recognizes it's happening. Let's give you the time you need to correct the way it's supposed to be, the system is intended to be, and then let's all move on. How do we make the process all least burdensome? One of the whole fundamental concepts of quality is how do you simplify? How do you reduce and error-proof systems? And that also includes the regulatory portion of it from our side. So how do we become part of that process? And then for driving that future state, how do we focus all that, again, towards the innovation to accelerate the improvements, adoption of some of those new technologies that Elizabeth was mentioning beforehand. That's really where we want people investing their time. We don't want to drive the behavior where people are backing away from it because it's hard to comply. All of that should come together to really drive that improvement in that whole medical device ecosystem. And I think from my standpoint, that's where we are for a quick update. So I'm going to wrap it there, and the slides are available. The next slide just shows where we can get additional information or comments, and that's available for anybody who wants to download these. If there's any questions, I think we've got a few minutes to take some of those, right?
Thanks, Cisco. Yeah, we have just a few minutes left, and I've had a few questions come in. Our first question, is it too late for FDA's software pre-cert program to adopt the CMMI?
So actually, we are working collaboratively, and I'm actually part of the team helping to develop the elements and appraisals for the pre-cert program. I don't think anything has ever been put off the table. Originally, the program was geared towards trying to define what the agency was caring about and allowing the flexibility for any of these different types of approaches or models to leverage a way to demonstrate that, that fulfillment.
Great, thank you. Second question, it seems that the CMMI assessment is a great way to allow firms to see what they need to do to build quality. But what mechanisms assure that firms take the necessary steps? Is it an honor system, or is it the risk that FDA will act against participants that don't improve over time, or is it something else?
Oh, this is George. I'll try to quickly take that because I know we're right up against the top of the hour. So the assessment obviously is a first step in which we're assessing the organization against the framework, and then there are results that come out of that. There is, on a 90-day basis, there is a follow-up, we call that a checkpoint with the lead appraiser as to how the organization is progressing with any of the results from their particular appraisal. That is a pretty broad conversation because the organization might be looking at some results and prioritizing those higher or lower against other concerns that they have in their business. And that has to be considered holistically as opposed to, it's something that's certainly not mandated. We're not coming in and saying, hey, here's your appraisal, now you need to fix these within 30, 60, 90, or 180 days. So that is a conversation. That certainly also weighs into what a second or subsequent appraisal looks like as to how the organization is responding to any of the results from a prior appraisal and what areas would be appraised as a part of a future appraisal. So I know it's a very short answer. There's a lot there to unpack. And certainly, if whoever's asking that question, if you want to reach out to us and follow up with me, I'd be happy to give a more thorough answer as to where we are with that, with our participants in the agency in terms of defining follow-up activities.
Great, thank you. I have one more question that just came in. I know we're running a minute or two over. Do you see the CMMI being applied earlier in the product life cycle, i.e. design controls versus production?
To me, and this is Cisco from the FDA, so I'll start with that one. I think that's always been a fundamental goal, really, and I think everybody recognizes, right, the way to really assure that that product quality, that drive for improvement and everything else is to get it much earlier in the life cycle of the development. So it is very much the intent as part of the next stage of evolution. The production area was just a very easy place to start for, I think, both industry and FDA, because everybody had a little bit of confidence of what was going on around there. There's a lot of measures and metrics that come out of it. The next iteration or the next phase that we're moving towards would cover driving into that earlier design element phase.
Great. Well, I want to thank our terrific panel of speakers today for today's webinar. We will be posting slides and the recordings from this webinar on the MDIC website. And up on the screen right now, I want to let you all know that we do have another event coming up at the end of the month on June 27th. Join us in person in Washington, D.C. or online for our Case for Quality Forum. Details are available on the website. Thank you all for joining us today.